You may seek to master emotional intelligence and social skills, but let me tell you this, the journey does not begin in the world, it begins in the soul. Most people approach these pursuits as techniques, strategies for influence, tools for control. But the one who truly wishes to master these realms must first descend into themselves. You must come face to face with what lives in your depths. For no man sees the world clearly unless he has first looked into the mirror of his own unconscious. Emotions are not enemies to be managed, nor fleeting sparks to be ignored. They are messengers, divine currents flowing from the deepest chambers of your psyche. They speak to you not in logic, but in symbol, dream, and sensation. He who dismisses his emotions as irrational condemns himself to be ruled by forces he cannot name. The wise man listens not to indulge, but to understand. You must not suppress the storm within you. You must sail through it, guided by awareness, until it reveals its sacred purpose. If you desire to connect with others, begin by connecting with yourself. What you reject in yourself, you will inevitably judge in others. What you fear in yourself, you will resist in them. You say you want to be socially skilled. Then learn first to accept your own imperfections, your chaos, your fragility. That is where empathy is born, not from theory, but from lived truth. You will only meet others as deeply as you have met yourself. There is no shortcut to this. You must confront your shadow, the parts of you buried, denied, unwanted, that anger you pretend not to have, that envy you mask with politeness, that fear you dress in pride. Bring it to light. For only when you integrate your darkness can you hold space for the darkness of others. Without this integration, all your social graces will be performance, and people will feel it. They may not know why, but they will sense something hollow beneath the surface. Emotional intelligence is not about manipulating your state to be constantly positive. It is about staying rooted while the storm passes through. It is the quiet capacity to feel everything without becoming lost in any of it. To recognize that your emotions are yours, but they are not you. In that space between feeling and reaction, freedom is born. From that freedom comes choice, and in choice, you awaken the power to respond rather than react, to relate rather than recoil. Social mastery is not built on techniques, but on presence, not on charm, but on authenticity. When you are true to your inner being, you carry a frequency that words cannot fabricate. Others may not understand it with their minds, but their souls will remember. They will feel seen, not because you said the right thing, but because your essence speaks a language beyond speech. Real communication transcends the tongue. It is spirit meeting spirit, heart meeting heart. Do not seek to merely appear wise. Seek to become whole. Do not aim to impress, aim to understand. Every encounter with another is a mirror, a reflection of some part of yourself you have yet to know. See it not as a challenge, but as an invitation to heal, to expand, to awaken. The path is not easy. You will be forced to let go of many illusions about who you are and how the world works. But in the fire of that undoing, you will emerge forged in truth, capable of loving with depth, listening with purity, and leading with soul. And when that happens, when your emotional life is not a burden but a compass, when your presence is not an act but a revelation, then you will have mastered not just a skill, but a way of being. And the world will shift, not because you have changed it, but because you have changed yourself. Self-awareness is the gateway to all transformation, because without knowing who you truly are, no lasting change can ever begin. To alter the outer world without first confronting the inner one is like repainting a broken wall without repairing its cracks. Self-awareness is not a surface-level acknowledgement of your likes, dislikes, or social roles. It is a deeper reckoning, a courageous confrontation with your thoughts, emotions, desires, and contradictions. It demands honesty, the kind that strips away all pretense and illusion. When you observe yourself not to judge, but to understand, You begin to see the hidden patterns that drive your choices, the unconscious fears that distort your perception, and the unresolved wounds that shape your relationships. Transformation begins the moment you become conscious of these forces. What is unconscious controls you without your permission, but the moment it becomes conscious, it loses its grip. If you often find yourself repeating the same mistakes, sabotaging your progress, or being triggered in familiar ways, it is not because you are weak. It is because something in you remains unseen. Self-awareness allows the light to reach these unseen parts. You begin to hear the inner dialogue running quietly beneath your words, the emotions that arise before your mind has caught up, the impulse behind every reaction. With awareness, you are no longer a puppet to your past. You become the witness, the one who chooses. It is not always pleasant to become self-aware. At first, it may feel like unraveling. You begin to notice how your pride hides your fear, how your control masks your insecurity, how your charm disguises your need for approval. You realize how much of your life was lived for validation, not truth. But in this discomfort lies the seed of transformation. The more you see yourself clearly, the less power your defenses have. You stop blaming the world and begin to take responsibility for your role in every experience. This is not self-blame. It is empowerment. For if you played a part in your suffering, you also hold the key to your healing. True growth cannot be copied from another. It must arise from the truth of your own being. That truth can only be revealed through awareness. No mentor, book, or system can replace the work of looking inward. When you know yourself, not as an idea, but as a living reality, you begin to align your actions with your values, your words with your inner compass. You stop seeking identity from the outside world and begin to root yourself in something unshakable within. And as your awareness deepens, your perception of others also transforms. You no longer relate from projection, but from presence. You listen with clarity, speak with integrity, and act with intention. All lasting transformation, whether emotional, relational, or spiritual, must begin with the courage to look within, for the self you are seeking to become is not far away. It is simply waiting to be seen, remembered, and awakened. What is unconscious in us controls us until it becomes conscious. This truth is not just psychological, it is spiritual, archetypal, and deeply human. So much of who we think we are is merely the tip of the iceberg, our conscious self, curated and shaped by societal expectations, education, family, and survival instincts. Yet beneath that surface lies the vast, unseen reservoir of the unconscious, which contains every forgotten memory, every repressed emotion, every instinctual urge and unexamined belief. It is here, in this hidden realm, that our true motivations reside. The tragedy is that while we may claim free will, we are often moved by forces we have never paused to examine. We think we are making choices, but more often than not, we are being chosen by patterns that live beneath our awareness. These unconscious forces show themselves in strange ways, in the things we deny about ourselves but judge harshly in others, in the relationships that seem to repeat the same painful story, even with different people, in the emotional reactions that feel disproportionate to the situation, in the addictions, obsessions, and compulsions we try to rationalize, in the dreams that trouble us at night. All of these are clues, symbols pointing to something beneath the surface trying to make itself known. The unconscious is not silent, it is merely ignored, but it will continue speaking through symptoms, through suffering, through synchronicity, until we listen. To make the unconscious conscious is not a task for the faint-hearted. It is not an intellectual exercise, but a descent into the underworld of the psyche. It requires humility because it reveals that we are not who we thought we were. It requires courage because it forces us to confront parts of ourselves we have spent our whole lives avoiding. But It is only in this confrontation that true freedom begins. As long as something remains unconscious, it controls us. But once brought into the light of awareness, it loses its power to dictate our lives from the shadows. There is no aspect of human life untouched by the unconscious. Our beliefs about love, success, failure, identity, all are shaped by early experiences that may no longer serve us. The child who was neglected may grow into an adult who seeks approval in every room. The one who was punished for speaking their truth may become someone who hides behind silence or false smiles. These patterns live on because they were never questioned. They became part of the invisible script by which we live. And so, to make the unconscious conscious is to reclaim the authorship of our own story. This process does not happen all at once. It unfolds layer by layer, like peeling an onion. At first, we may only notice surface-level patterns, a certain trigger that always brings up anger, a type of person we're drawn to despite knowing it's unhealthy. But with time and reflection, deeper truths begin to emerge. We begin to see how much of our personality is a defense mechanism, how the strong persona hides a deep vulnerability, how the nice one masks suppressed resentment, how the independent person is terrified of being abandoned. These realizations are not comfortable, but they are liberating, because once we see clearly, we can choose differently. We no longer have to live by automatic reactions. We can respond from consciousness, not compulsion. Dreams are one of the most direct gateways into the unconscious. They are the psyche's way of communicating what we have not yet seen or accepted. A dream of being chased may reflect a truth we're running from in waking life. A dream of falling may symbolize our fear of losing control. Dreams bypass the ego and speak in images, metaphors, and symbols. If we learn to listen to them, not literally but symbolically, they become invaluable guides on the journey inward. The unconscious is not our enemy. It is not something to be eradicated. It is the part of us that holds not only wounds, but also wisdom. Within it lie the seeds of creativity, intuition, instinct, and spiritual insight. It is the womb of transformation, but to access these gifts, we must stop fearing it and begin relating to it. The shadow is perhaps the most powerful aspect of the unconscious. It is everything in us we do not wish to see. Our selfishness, envy, aggression, lust, neediness, and fear. These are the traits we push away because they do not align with the image we want to present. But what we deny does not disappear. It simply moves underground, where it festers and controls us in ways we can't see. A person who believes they are incapable of anger may explode in rage when finally triggered. Someone who insists they are always generous may manipulate others through guilt. The more we disown parts of ourselves, the more we become puppets of those disowned parts. Integration, not repression, is the key. When we accept our shadow, we gain the power to choose what we do with it. The one who has met their darkness can also stand in their light. Relationships, too, are shaped by the unconscious. We are drawn to others not only by attraction, but by resonance, by something in the other that mirrors what is unhealed or unmet in us. This is why love can be both beautiful and painful. The people closest to us often activate the very wounds we have buried. This is not a mistake, it is an opportunity. Through the mirror of relationship, we are shown where we still have work to do. If we are willing to see not just the faults in others, but the reflections of ourselves within them, relationships become alchemical containers for growth. Projection is another mechanism by which the unconscious operates. What we cannot accept in ourselves, we often project onto others. We see them as arrogant, controlling, needy, or weak, without recognizing those same traits within. Projection distorts our perception and sabotages our interactions. The work, then, is to take back our projections. When we feel a strong emotional reaction to someone, it is worth asking, What part of me is being activated here? What am I really reacting to? Often, the answer lies not in the external situation, but in an internal story that has been running for years, unnoticed. To live unconsciously is to be at the mercy of fate. To live consciously is to co-create with it. When we bring light to what was hidden, we begin to participate in our own evolution. We move from victimhood to authorship. We stop repeating the past and start creating the future. But this requires daily vigilance. Awareness is not a one-time event. It is a practice, a way of being. It means constantly checking in with ourselves. What am I feeling? Why am I reacting this way? What belief is operating here? What part of me is speaking? Even our spirituality can be contaminated by the unconscious. We may use spiritual language to bypass our pain, to inflate the ego, to avoid the messiness of the human experience. We may seek enlightenment as a way to escape rather than integrate. But true spirituality does not float above the unconscious. It descends into it. It embraces the shadow and transforms it into light. It honors the wholeness of being, not just the parts we like. Making the unconscious conscious is the most important work a human being can do. It is the path to maturity, integrity, and inner peace. It is how we stop being at war with ourselves. It is how we break generational cycles. It is how we access our gifts and offer them to the world. No amount of external success, affirmation, or knowledge can replace this inner reckoning. Until we do this work, we will remain split within, driven by unseen forces, repeating the same painful patterns, searching outside for what can only be resolved within. To make the unconscious conscious is not to rid ourselves of darkness, but to bring it into relationship with the light. It is to walk through the valley of the unknown and find not monsters, but misunderstood parts of ourselves waiting to be integrated. It is to reclaim every lost piece of our soul and become whole again. When we do this, we are no longer ruled by fear, shame, or reactivity. We become centered, grounded, and awake. And in that awakening, we find not only personal freedom, but the capacity to love and serve others from a place of deep, authentic presence. That is the power of consciousness. That is the path of true transformation. Authenticity is more powerful than charm. The true self has a magnetic presence. Charm may catch the eye, but authenticity captures the soul. In a world that constantly encourages us to polish our image, to present a curated version of ourselves to gain approval, attention, or admiration, the act of simply being real has become revolutionary. Charm is often the mask we wear to protect our vulnerabilities, to gain influence without exposing what lies underneath. It operates from a desire to control perception, but authenticity, raw, grounded, unapologetic, flows from a much deeper place. It does not seek to impress, it simply is, and in that being it evokes something primal and profound in others. There is a presence that comes from someone who is truly themselves. You feel it before they speak. Their words carry weight because they come from a place that has been lived, not rehearsed. People often mistake charm for connection. They believe that if they say the right things, smile at the right moments, and adapt to others' expectations, they will be accepted, admired, or even loved. And for a time this works. Charm is like perfume. It leaves a pleasant impression, but it fades quickly. It is not rooted in anything stable. When circumstances change, or when deeper challenges arise, charm reveals its shallowness. Relationships built on charm alone often collapse under pressure because they were never anchored in truth. On the other hand, authenticity might not always be pleasant. It can be messy, uncomfortable, even confronting. But it is real, and because of that, it creates trust. People are drawn to those who show up fully, who speak with honesty even when it's difficult, who are not performing but present. There is something irresistible about a person who is unafraid to be seen as they are. Their confidence is not loud, but quiet and unwavering. They do not bend themselves to fit the moment. They allow the moment to meet them where they are. They speak not to impress, but to express, and because of that, their words land differently. Their silence feels different. They are not selling anything, they are being someone, and this being is magnetic because it resonates with the longing in others to do the same, to drop the mask, to breathe freely, to stop trying so hard to be liked. Authenticity is not the same as bluntness or self-indulgence. It does not mean saying everything you feel without discernment, nor does it give license to disregard the impact of your words and actions. Rather, it is the alignment of your inner and outer worlds. It is when what you say, what you feel, and what you do are in harmony. It is when your actions are not dictated by fear of judgment or hunger for praise, but by integrity. This alignment creates coherence in your energy. People may not understand why, but they feel safe with you. They sense something trustworthy, something solid. You become a mirror in which others can see themselves more clearly, not because you flatter them, but because your presence encourages truth. The pursuit of charm often leads to fragmentation. You begin to compartmentalize yourself, adjusting your personality depending on who is in the room. You become a chameleon, endlessly shifting to meet others' expectations. But in the process, you lose touch with your own center. You begin to question who you really are beneath all the adaptations. You become anxious, not because you are flawed, but because you are disconnected. This anxiety is not a weakness. It is a signal that your soul is longing for reunion with your truth. And when you ignore that longing for too long, you start to feel hollow, no matter how many people applaud your charm. To be authentic is to risk rejection. It is to stand in your truth knowing that not everyone will agree with you, accept you, or even like you. But it is also to stand in your power, because when you no longer rely on others' approval to feel worthy, you become unshakable. Your sense of self becomes rooted in something eternal rather than external. You no longer chase validation because you have already validated yourself by honoring your truth. And from this place, your interactions change. You no longer speak to manipulate outcomes. You speak because your truth has value. You no longer perform kindness to earn love. You offer love because it flows from a full cup. Authenticity allows for vulnerability, and vulnerability is the bridge between souls. It is only when you reveal your humanness, your fears, doubts, failures, and longings, that others can relate to you on a meaningful level. Charm may win you admiration, but only authenticity can create intimacy. Real connection happens when people feel seen, not just entertained. And when you are authentic, you give others permission to drop their own masks. You become a catalyst for healing, simply by being real. There is also a spiritual dimension to authenticity. When you align with your true self, you begin to align with something greater than yourself. You move in rhythm with the deeper intelligence of life. Your intuition becomes stronger, your choices clearer, your presence more impactful. You are no longer fragmented between who you are and who you pretend to be. That inner unity radiates outward. It shows in your eyes, your voice, your timing. People feel it, even if they cannot name it. It is the radiance of someone who is at peace with themselves. The world does not need more charming personalities. It needs more honest souls. People who have the courage to show up fully, to speak truth to illusion, to embody integrity in a culture obsessed with image. Authenticity is not glamorous, but it is sacred. It is the path of wholeness, and wholeness is magnetic because it is rare. When you live from this place, you stop trying to convince others of your worth. Your very presence becomes the proof. Even in leadership, authenticity outshines charm. A leader who tries to win people with charisma may create followers, but a leader who lives in alignment with truth creates other leaders. They inspire not through their words, but through their example. They do not pretend to be perfect, but they are deeply consistent. Their transparency builds trust, and their humility commands respect. They do not chase power. Power flows to them naturally because people are drawn to what is real. And in a world full of deception, realness is power. To cultivate authenticity, you must be willing to slow down, to listen to your inner voice even when it challenges the noise around you. You must be willing to question your motivations, to ask yourself why you say what you say, do what you do, want what you want. You must be willing to sit in silence long enough to hear your soul's whisper beneath the ego's chatter. This is not always easy, but it is necessary, for only in that stillness can you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And when you remember, you return, not to a version of yourself, but to your essence. That essence does not need polishing. It does not need approval. It simply needs permission. Permission to exist fully. Permission to speak clearly. Permission to feel deeply. When you give yourself that permission, you set yourself free. And freedom is always magnetic. There will be moments when being authentic feels lonely, when the crowd is moving one way and your truth points in another direction. But remember, authenticity does not promise comfort. It promises alignment. And alignment brings a deeper peace than any comfort rooted in pretense. In time, you will find your tribe, not the people drawn to your charm, but those who resonate with your truth. And those are the ones worth keeping. In the end, life is too short for masks, too precious for performances, too sacred for superficiality. When you strip away the layers of conditioning, comparison, and conformity, what remains is the essence of who you are. And that essence is enough, more than enough. It is the source of your power, your peace, your presence. The more you live from it, the more you shine, not with the glitter of charm, but with the quiet glow of authenticity. And that glow will not just light your path. It will light the path for others. To understand others, one must first understand the archetypes within. Every person we meet, every relationship we form, and every reaction we experience is not just an external event. It is also a mirror of our own inner world. We do not see people as they are. We see them as we are. What we love or hate in others is often a reflection of something stirred within us, consciously or unconsciously. And what stirs us most deeply is the activation of archetypes, those universal patterns of human behavior, emotion, and experience that live in the collective psyche. Archetypes are not roles we play. They are timeless, primordial forces that shape how we live, think, love, fight, suffer, and grow. They are not created by us. They are discovered in us. They exist beyond culture, beyond language, and beyond individual memory. They appear in myth, religion, dreams, and art. They emerge in times of crisis or transformation. They are the invisible structures behind the stories of our lives. When we look into ourselves and begin to recognize these archetypes, the hero, the victim, the sage, the shadow, the trickster, the lover, the ruler, we begin to understand not only our own drives, fears, and longings, but also those of others. We begin to see that behind every personality lies a pattern far older than the person themselves. Each archetype contains both light and shadow. The hero seeks to overcome, but can become arrogant. The caregiver nurtures, but may martyr themselves. The rebel can spark change, but also create chaos. The lover opens the heart, but can fall into obsession. When we see these archetypes in ourselves, we become more honest, more compassionate, and more whole. We stop identifying with just one narrow self-image and start to embrace the many energies that live within us. And in doing so, we also soften toward others. We recognize that behind the angry boss may be a wounded warrior. Behind the distant friend may be a frightened child. Behind the manipulative lover may be a rejected orphan. This recognition does not excuse behavior, but it deepens our empathy. It reminds us that every person is living out a story that often began long before they were aware of it. When we are unconscious of the archetypes operating in our own psyche, we tend to project them onto others. We see the shadow not in ourselves, but in our enemies. We look for a savior outside because we have not yet awakened the hero within. We demand perfection from others because we deny our own flaws. Projection is the language of the unconscious. It allows us to interact with parts of ourselves we cannot yet own. But if we are willing to turn inward and recognize those parts, the need to project them outward begins to fade. We no longer make others responsible for our inner world. We reclaim our power, and with that power comes clarity. Only then can we begin to truly see people as they are, not as containers for our projections, but as complex beings shaped by the same universal patterns that live in us. This inner work requires radical self-honesty. It asks us to confront the stories we have told ourselves about who we are and who others must be. It requires that we become both the observer and the participant in our lives, able to step back and ask, what archetype is being activated in this moment? Am I speaking from my wise self or from my wounded child? Is this person showing up as a trickster meant to disrupt my illusions, or a mirror reflecting back my disowned parts? These questions are not just intellectual, they are transformational. They shift our perception and open us to new possibilities. Conflict becomes less about blame and more about understanding. Disappointment becomes less about betrayal and more about unmet expectations rooted in a deeper narrative. When we recognize the archetypal forces at play within us, we also gain access to a vast inner library of wisdom. Each archetype has its lessons, its strengths, its purpose. The sage teaches discernment. The warrior teaches courage. The lover teaches vulnerability. The ruler teaches responsibility. When we honor these energies rather than suppress them, we become more integrated. We can draw upon different aspects of ourselves depending on the moment. We are no longer stuck in one identity, trying to be everything for everyone or playing out unconscious roles. Instead, we become fluid, responsive, alive. And in this aliveness, we meet others not with judgment but with awareness. Understanding the archetypes also helps us navigate relationships with greater depth. Romantic partners, friends, parents, children, all are arenas where our inner cast of characters comes alive. When we fall in love, it may be the lover in us awakening, but is it the mature lover who sees with clarity, or the naive one who idealizes and clings? When we argue, is it truly our adult self speaking, or is it the wounded child demanding to be heard? When we mentor someone, are we doing so from the generous sage or from the insecure ego that needs to feel superior? These distinctions matter. They determine whether our relationships uplift us or drain us, heal us or wound us further. The archetypes do not operate in isolation. They interact, conflict, evolve. Sometimes the hero must confront the shadow before they can complete their journey. Sometimes the caregiver must learn to set boundaries or risk being consumed. Sometimes the orphan must risk trusting again to become the seeker. These inner dramas are not distractions from life. They are life. They shape our decisions, our desires, our destinies. And the more we recognize their presence, the more consciously we can participate in our own evolution. We begin to shape our lives rather than be shaped unconsciously by these patterns. In truth, every person is a walking constellation of archetypes. Some dominate, others lie dormant. Some are inherited through culture or family, others arise from personal experience. The beauty is that these patterns are shared. The archetypes within you are not unique to you. They are human, which means that by understanding your own inner world, you gain insight into the world of others. You begin to speak the deeper language of humanity, beyond words, beyond behavior, into the realm of soul, you begin to see the invisible architecture of a person's life, and in that seeing, judgment gives way to compassion. Even collective movements, institutions, and cultures are shaped by archetypes. Nations go through cycles of the warrior and the ruler, the rebel and the victim. Religions speak through the sage and the prophet, the martyr and the healer. Art channels the creator, politics often evokes the trickster. When we lack archetypal awareness, we are easily manipulated by these forces. We fall into mass projections, scapegoating, idolizing, demonizing. But when we are awake to the archetypes, we can stand apart, observe the play, and choose our role with intention. We are no longer swept away by the tide of the collective unconscious. This is why inner work is not just personal. It is relational, cultural, even spiritual. When we come to know ourselves at the level of archetypes, we begin to sense the deeper order of things. We begin to see that each person is not merely a personality, but a vessel through which universal forces are moving. Some have come to teach, some to challenge, some to awaken, some to reflect. The more conscious we become of this, the less reactive we are. We can honor the role without losing ourselves in the performance. Understanding the archetypes within is not about fixing oneself. It is about becoming whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means integration. It means owning our darkness as well as our light. It means recognizing that the victim and the warrior both live in us, that the saboteur and the creator both have a role to play. When we stop rejecting parts of ourselves, we stop rejecting others for carrying those parts. This is the foundation of deep understanding, not agreement, not approval, but resonance, a knowing that says, I see you because I have seen that in me. In every moment of misunderstanding, there is an archetype trying to be known. When someone reacts defensively, it may be their inner child protecting an old wound. When someone withdraws emotionally, it may be their orphan avoiding more abandonment. When someone becomes controlling, it may be their ruler trying to restore order to inner chaos. If we only respond to the surface, we remain trapped in conflict. But if we learn to see through the archetypal lens, we open the door to true understanding, not only of others, but of life itself. To understand others, then, is to take the sacred journey inward. It is to map the terrain of your own psyche, to meet your own archetypes with humility and curiosity. As you become more familiar with their voices, you will begin to recognize them in the people around you, not as strangers, but as fellow travelers. And in this recognition, something miraculous happens. The walls between self and other begin to dissolve. You begin to listen more deeply, speak more honestly, love more freely, because you are no longer relating from the mask, but from the soul. And from soul to soul, there is always understanding. Emotion is energy. Mastery comes when we can observe, not react. The moment this truth begins to sink into our consciousness, a great shift occurs. We start to view our emotions not as random storms to be feared or repressed, but as profound energetic movements that flow through us, pointing to inner truths, unmet needs, and the deeper dynamics of our psyche. Emotions are not enemies, they are messengers, and they carry with them the vitality of our lived experience. When they arise, they bring color to our reality, but without awareness, they can also bring chaos. The difference lies in the space between feeling and reacting, the space where observation is born, and in that observation, mastery becomes possible. To feel deeply is not a weakness, it is a sign of life. Emotions arise from the soul's interaction with the world. Anger emerges when something we value is violated. Fear warns of danger or change. Sadness accompanies loss, revealing the depth of our connection. Joy bubbles up when alignment is felt between inner and outer reality. These emotional waves are not problems in themselves. They are indicators, but in the absence of consciousness, they become compulsions. We feel, we react, and we lose our center. We lash out, shut down, run away, or collapse. We become puppets of our emotions instead of witnesses to their wisdom. Observation changes everything. When we observe an emotion, we create distance, not distance in the sense of repression, but in the sense of spacious awareness. We become the sky in which the storm appears. We say, anger is here, instead of I am angry. We note the rising wave, its texture, its pull. We feel its heat, its urgency, but we do not become it. We do not let it speak for us, act for us, hijack our clarity. This is not detachment, this is integration. To observe an emotion is to allow it fully without being consumed by it. It is to feel its force without losing our sense of self within it. This form of mastery is not suppression. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They simply retreat to the unconscious, where they grow in shadow and intensity. What we do not face consciously will govern us unconsciously. What we repress returns, often disguised and distorted. Emotional mastery is not about feeling less. It is about feeling more clearly. It is about learning to sit with discomfort, to trace it to its roots, to ask what it is trying to teach us. Every emotion has a message. Anger may be asking for a boundary. Sadness may be asking for a release. Fear may be asking for caution or courage. Joy may be asking for expansion. But we will not hear these messages if we are too busy reacting. The reaction is often the mind's attempt to resolve the discomfort of emotion quickly. We want to fix it, avoid it, or discharge it onto others. We project our pain onto those closest to us. We make them the enemy of our peace, but they are not the cause, they are the trigger. The cause lies deeper, often rooted in past wounds, unmet needs, unresolved traumas. Observation allows us to break this pattern. It invites us to become curious rather than reactive. What is this emotion showing me? Where have I felt this before? What part of me is crying out through this feeling? Through this inquiry, emotion becomes a doorway to self-knowledge. Each feeling reveals a layer of our story. Perhaps the anger is not just about this moment, but about a lifetime of not being heard. Perhaps the fear is not about the present risk, but about the ancient wound of abandonment. When we follow the thread of emotion inward, we touch the fabric of our psyche. We begin to unravel the knots that keep us trapped in cycles of reaction. We begin to heal, and in healing we gain power, not over others, but over our own inner world. Emotional mastery does not mean that emotions stop arising. It means that their arising no longer robs us of choice. We become sovereign in our responses. We can hold the fire of anger without burning someone else with it. We can walk through the fog of fear without freezing in it. We can swim in the tide of sorrow without drowning in it. We become alchemists, transforming raw emotional energy into wisdom, action, and understanding. This inner alchemy begins with presence. When emotion arises, it is the body that first feels it. The heart races, the chest tightens, the stomach clenches. The body does not lie. The body is the stage where emotion plays out its truth. To master emotion, we must return to the body, to its signals, its rhythms. We must learn to breathe with the emotion, not against it. We must allow it space to move through, rather than resisting or dramatizing it. Observation is deeply physical. It is not just a mental act. It is an embodied awareness, and as we practice this presence again and again, something shifts. We begin to trust ourselves. We no longer fear our emotional life. We no longer need to numb or escape. We realize that we are capable of holding any emotion without falling apart, and this realization brings immense freedom. It liberates us from the need to control everything outside of us to feel safe inside. It allows us to be fully alive, fully human. This inner stability also transforms our relationships. When we are no longer reactive, we create space for others to be as they are. We stop trying to manage their emotions because we are no longer afraid of our own. We can listen without defensiveness. We can speak with honesty rather than blame. We can hold conflict with compassion, knowing that each person's reaction is rooted in their own emotional history. Observation turns arguments into opportunities. It turns rupture into repair. It turns triggers into teachers. Yet emotional mastery is a path, not a destination. There will be moments when we forget, when the wave is too strong and we react. But even these moments are part of the journey. Each misstep is an invitation to return, to reflect, to recalibrate. We begin to notice our patterns, the words we say when we're angry, the ways we shut down when we're hurt, the things that always seem to set us off. We learn from them, we grow through them, and over time the reactions become fewer, the awareness becomes sharper, the peace becomes deeper. In spiritual terms, emotion is sacred energy. It is the movement of soul through matter. To master it is not to dominate it but to honor it. It is to allow it to rise and fall like a sacred tide. Observation is the temple where emotion can be held in reverence, not in resistance. It is the space where emotion is not judged as good or bad, but recognized as meaningful. And in this sacred space, emotion reveals its true purpose, not to overwhelm us, but to awaken us. When we live from this place, we become a refuge, not only for ourselves, but for others. People feel safe with us because they sense our stability. They know we will not lash out unpredictably. They sense that we can hold their emotions because we have learned to hold our own. We become emotional leaders, not by suppressing feeling, but by embodying awareness. We bring light into the emotional darkness, not by bypassing it, but by being willing to sit in it with presence and patience. This is true emotional intelligence, not merely knowing the name of a feeling, but knowing its nature, its rhythm, its wisdom. It is the capacity to remain centered in the eye of the storm, to act with intention rather than reaction, to choose response over reflex. It is a power that comes not from force, but from understanding. And it is available to anyone willing to turn inward and observe. So when the next emotion arises, whether anger, fear, sadness, joy, or anything in between, pause, breathe, watch. Let it move through you like a river, without needing to dam it or drown in it. Listen to its message, feel its energy, and remember, you are not the storm, you are the sky, and the more you can observe, the more you can transform. This is the essence of mastery. This is the path to inner freedom. Shadow integration is essential for empathy and human connection. Without confronting and embracing the hidden parts of ourselves, the disowned, the denied, the feared, we remain fragmented, operating from illusions about who we are and what others are. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is the unconscious storehouse of everything we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. It contains our anger, envy, shame, arrogance, guilt, and also our unclaimed potential, our creativity, power, sensuality, and intuition. These are not bad qualities. They are simply unlived. And when unlived, they act out through projection, judgment, and emotional reactivity. Until we turn toward the shadow with awareness and compassion, we cannot fully turn toward another human being with the same. Empathy is not about sentimentality. It is not simply feeling sorry for someone or imagining what they might be experiencing. True empathy requires that we have traversed our own inner terrain. It demands that we have faced our own pain, our own failures, our own contradictions, so that when we see them reflected in another, we do not recoil or judge. We recognize them. We say, "Ah, yes, I too know this place." This recognition is the foundation of human connection. Not perfection, not agreement, but the shared reality of being complex, fallible, emotional, and evolving beings. When we deny our shadow, we create distance from others. We put up a false front, an image of who we think we should be. We try to be kind, good, successful, strong, positive, and in doing so, we push all that doesn't fit this image into the dark. But this darkness doesn't disappear. It leaks out in subtle ways. We gossip about people we envy. We snap at those who touch our wounds. We silently compete with those we claim to admire. We resent the very traits in others that we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. This is projection, seeing out there what we cannot bear to see and hear. Projection is the great enemy of empathy because it distorts our vision. It makes us mistake our inner world for someone else's truth. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim those projections. It is to say, this anger I see in him, I carry it too. This arrogance I despise in her, I have tasted it myself. This weakness I pity in them, I fear it in myself. It is not about condoning harmful behavior or excusing injustice. It is about seeing with clarity, and this clarity makes connection possible, because when we stop projecting, we start perceiving. We see the person, not our wound on them. We hear their voice, not just the echo of our history. Human connection demands vulnerability, but we cannot be vulnerable if we are terrified of what we might reveal. If we are constantly managing our image, hiding our flaws, pretending we have it all together, we create walls around us. Others sense this. They may admire us, but they will not feel close to us, because closeness comes not from perfection, but from presence, from the willingness to be real, and being real means knowing and owning our shadow. Shadow integration also makes love deeper and more enduring. In relationships, especially intimate ones, our shadows inevitably emerge. We attract people who reflect back our unconscious parts. The partner who seems overly controlling may be mirroring our own denied need for control. The one who avoids conflict may be touching our own fear of confrontation. We fall in love with light, but we stay, or run, because of the shadow. If we haven't done our inner work, we blame the other. You're making me feel this way. You're the problem. But the wise heart asks, what part of me is being activated right now? What old wound is being touched? This doesn't mean we tolerate abuse or dismiss our boundaries. It means we take responsibility for our own emotional landscape. We stop expecting the other to carry the burden of our unhealed past, and this responsibility is freedom. It allows us to choose our responses rather than be driven by our unconscious reactions. It allows us to love from wholeness rather than need. And when two people are committed to integrating their own shadows, the relationship becomes a crucible for transformation. It becomes a sacred ground where healing is not just possible, it is inevitable. The shadow is also where much of our empathy for suffering is born. If we have never allowed ourselves to grieve, how can we truly sit with another's grief? If we have never felt lost, how can we guide someone in darkness? Our wounds, when faced and integrated, become the bridge to others. They give us language, texture, depth. They make us trustworthy. We become people who don't flinch at pain, who don't offer shallow platitudes or quick fixes, but who stay, who witness, who listen with the ears of the soul. Because we know what it means to suffer, and we have found meaning on the other side, this kind of empathy is not exhausting. It doesn't drain us because it is not based on rescuing. It is based on presence. We no longer try to save people from their pain. We simply join them in it, knowing that presence itself is healing. We do not carry their burden, but we let them know they are not alone in carrying it. And this alone can change lives. In the broader context of society, shadow integration is also essential. Collective shadows, racism, classism, misogyny, xenophobia, are born from unacknowledged personal and cultural shadows. What we do not heal in ourselves, we project onto entire groups of people. We dehumanize, scapegoat, otherize. We divide the world into good and evil, us and them. But the truth is more complex. The seeds of all that we fear lie within us. When we integrate our own darkness, we are less likely to demonize others. We become humble. We become capable of compassion without naivety, of justice without vengeance, of power without domination. This kind of transformation is not quick. It requires courage, patience, and a willingness to feel what we've long avoided. The shadow holds not only pain, but also power. Our creativity often lies hidden beneath shame. Our capacity for leadership may be buried under fear of judgment. Our sexuality may be locked away beneath religious conditioning. As we bring these energies into the light, we reclaim our fullness, and in doing so, we become more human. Not idealized versions of humanity, but real, embodied, grounded, awake beings who can walk through the world with open eyes and open hearts. Spiritual growth, too, depends on shadow integration. Many seekers aim for light, transcendence, peace. But without the descent into the shadow, the light is incomplete. It becomes a mask, a spiritual bypass. True spirituality embraces both light and dark. It knows that divinity is not only found in bliss, but in brokenness. That the sacred is not only in the heavens, but in the dirt, the blood, the rawness of human life. Shadow integration is not the opposite of enlightenment. It is the path to it. So to connect deeply with others, we must first connect deeply with ourselves. Not just with what is lovable and admirable, but with what is hidden and hard to hold. And we must do this not once, but over and over as new layers arise. Each confrontation with the shadow is an invitation to grow in compassion. Each time we choose to face rather than flee, to own rather than project, to understand rather than judge, we take a step closer to true empathy. And not empathy as sentiment, but empathy as presence, as courage, as love. In this space of integrated awareness, human connection becomes something more than social interaction. It becomes a sacred meeting, a soul-to-soul encounter, a place where truth can be spoken, wounds can be held, laughter can rise freely, and silence can be shared without fear. This is the kind of connection that heals. This is the kind of connection that endures. And it is only possible when the self has embraced its own complexity, when the shadow is no longer exiled but welcomed, when we stop hiding from our humanity and start honoring it. Only then can we look into the eyes of another, stranger, friend, or lover, and truly say, "I see you." Not as a reflection of my projections, not as a character in my narrative, but as a whole, sovereign being walking your own path through the light and the dark. And in that seeing, something eternal recognizes itself. Something ancient sighs in relief, because finally we are not alone. Real communication flows from soul to soul, not just intellect to intellect. When we speak merely from the intellect, we exchange data, concepts, arguments, opinions, and analysis. The words may be sharp, clever, even convincing, but something essential remains untouched. The intellect communicates structure, but it does not necessarily carry life. True connection happens when something deeper stirs, when the soul speaks and the soul hears. This is communication that transcends the limits of vocabulary. It is not dependent on the perfect phrasing or well-reasoned conclusions. It is the resonance between beings who have touched their inner truth and are willing to meet in that space. Words are the visible garments of communication, but soul connection is the invisible presence behind them. A person may say little and yet communicate everything. Another may speak endlessly and yet reveal nothing. What makes the difference is presence. When we are present, we are not trying to impress, control, manipulate, or win. We are simply being, and from that being we speak, not as performance, but as expression. And when another is also present, they receive not just the words, but the energy behind them. This is why some silences are louder than speeches, and why a single look can say more than paragraphs. To communicate from the soul, we must first be in contact with our own. This means we must have cultivated stillness, self-awareness, and authenticity. The soul does not speak through masks. It does not engage in performance. It reveals, it opens, it shares what is essential. And to hear the soul, both in ourselves and in others, we must slow down. We must listen not only with the ears, but with the heart, the body, the intuition. We must become attuned to tone, gesture, energy. We must feel beneath the surface. Much of what is called communication today is merely noise. People talking at each other, defending positions, asserting identities, reacting to wounds. There is little space, little silence, little curiosity. But when communication becomes soulful, it transforms into something sacred. The space between people becomes charged with meaning. Each person becomes more themselves in the presence of the other. There is no need to pretend. The soul cannot pretend. It can only be. In such communication, vulnerability is not weakness. It is the gateway. The soul is not armored. It does not hide behind certainty. It offers itself, even if clumsily, even if imperfectly. And when another receives that offering with care, something holy occurs. A connection is made that nourishes both. This is why we remember certain conversations for years, not because of what was said, but because of how we felt seen, heard, met. Soul-to-soul communication does not require agreement. It does not depend on shared beliefs or identical views. It is rooted in mutual respect and recognition. The soul sees the other not as an opponent or object, but as a mystery to be honored. Even in disagreement, there is gentleness. Even in conflict, there is care, because the goal is not to win, but to understand, to connect. This level of communication is rare because it demands that we let go of our defenses. Most people speak from the layer of the persona, the social self that is trained to protect, to please, to impress. The persona speaks in polished phrases, guarded tones, rehearsed roles. But behind that, the soul waits, tender, raw, real. And when we dare to speak from that place, something shifts. The other feels it. The air changes. The moment becomes charged with truth. To sustain such communication, we must become comfortable with not knowing. The intellect craves control, certainty, resolution. The soul is spacious. It can hold paradox, ambiguity, mystery. When we communicate soulfully, we allow for pauses, for emotions, for things to arise organically. We do not rush to fill silence. We let it speak. We trust the unfolding. We sense when to speak, when to listen, when to simply be together without words. This is especially vital in love. In deep relationships, the soul longs not just for companionship, but for communion. It wants to be seen in its wholeness, not just the light, but the shadow, not just the strength, but the longing. Soulful communication is how intimacy deepens, not through constant talking, but through authentic sharing. Through moments of stillness where everything is felt, but nothing needs to be explained. Through the courage to say, "This is my truth right now," even if it is messy or unfinished. It is in these moments that trust is built, not just intellectual trust, but existential trust. The kind that says, "I can be all of myself here." And when two souls meet in that space, healing happens. Old wounds soften, armor falls away. The past no longer has such a grip. Because when we are truly heard at the soul level, we remember who we are beneath the noise. This form of communication also awakens our deeper intelligence. The soul carries wisdom beyond logic. It speaks through intuition, images, symbols, feelings. When we allow the soul to guide our expression, we may find ourselves saying things we didn't plan, but which carry surprising clarity. Or we may simply sit in presence, and the silence itself speaks. The soul is not linear. It reveals in layers, spirals, echoes, and to honor that, we must learn to listen differently. This has profound implications for leadership, teaching, counseling, parenting, friendship, any realm where connection matters. A leader who communicates from the soul inspires not just minds, but hearts. A teacher who teaches from the soul ignites a hunger for truth. A parent who speaks soulfully raises children who feel safe to be fully human. Soulful communication is not a technique. It is a way of being. And it begins with inner honesty. We cannot speak from the soul if we are out of touch with our own feelings, wounds, and dreams. We must be willing to face ourselves, to feel deeply, to be shaped by what we encounter within. Then, when we speak, we do not just repeat what we've read or heard. We speak what we know in our bones. We speak from experience, from embodiment, and that kind of speech carries weight. People listen, not because we are loud, but because we are real. In a world saturated with information, real communication is more vital than ever. We are surrounded by talking but starved for meaning. We scroll through words but rarely feel met. The soul longs for more. It longs to be touched, not just informed. It longs to touch others, not just impress them. And when we begin to honor that longing, our relationships change. We start to notice what nourishes and what depletes. We become more selective about how and with whom we share our inner world. This does not mean we become aloof or silent. It means we become intentional. We speak when we have something real to say. We listen when someone offers something real. We stop performing. We stop pretending to know. We become humble witnesses of each other's becoming. And in doing so, we create sacred spaces, conversations where transformation is possible. The soul does not speak in formulas. It speaks in presence, and presence cannot be faked. It requires that we be fully here, not thinking about the next thing to say or how we are being perceived. When we are present, we hear not just the words, but the person behind them. We sense what is being said and what is being protected. We become attuned to the unsaid, and sometimes by simply naming it, gently, kindly, we unlock a door. This attentiveness is the heart of empathy. Not assumption, not projection, but listening with the whole being. It is the art of making space for another's truth without needing to fix it or relate it to our own. In this way, communication becomes a gift. Not a transaction, but an offering, not a contest, but a communion. When communication is soltus, it moves us. It may not always be easy. The soul often speaks truths the ego resists, but it is always alive. And that aliveness nourishes us. We feel more human, more awake, more connected, not just to each other, but to something larger. Because when two souls truly meet, the divine is present, not as an abstract concept, but as the energy of life flowing freely between us. This is what we truly long for, not just to be understood intellectually, but to be known deeply, not just to hear, but to feel heard, not just to see, but to feel seen. And that kind of knowing, hearing, and seeing can only happen at the soul level. It is not a skill to be mastered, but a truth to be lived. So let us speak with soul. Let us listen with soul. Let us make space for the sacred in the everyday conversation. Let us remember that behind every word is a life, a longing, a mystery. And when we honor that, we restore something ancient and essential. We remember what it means to be human. And more than that, we remember what it means to be whole. The soul does not crave more words. It yearns for truth. In a world overflowing with noise and shallow exchanges, it is the courage to communicate from the depth of our being that sets us apart. When we speak soul to soul, we do more than share ideas. We awaken presence. We foster healing. We create belonging. This is not communication for approval, persuasion, or performance. This is communion, the sacred act of meeting one another in raw, honest human truth. Let this be your calling. Speak not just to be heard, but to be felt. Listen not just for reply, but for resonance. Strip away the layers of performance, step out from behind the mask of intellect, and let your essence emerge. The world does not need more clever voices. It needs more real ones. Let your words be the bridge between hearts, not just minds. For in that space where souls truly meet, transformation begins, and love becomes possible.